The Fly by Catherine Mansfield. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Fly by Catherine Mansfield. "You're very snug in here," piped old Mr. Woodyfield, and peered out of the great green leather armchair by his friend the boss's desk, as a baby peers out of its pram. His talk was over. It was time for him to be off. But he did not want to go. Since he had retired, since his stroke, the wife and the girls kept him boxed up in the house every day of the week except Tuesday. On Tuesday he was dressed and brushed and allowed to cut back to the city for the day. Though what he did there, the wife and girls couldn't imagine. Made a nuisance of himself to his friends, they supposed. Well, perhaps so. All the same, we cling to our last pleasures as the tree clings to its last leaves. So there sat old Woodyfield, smoking a cigar and staring almost greedily at the boss, who rolled in his office chair, stout, rosy, 5 years older than he, and still going strong, stood at the helm. It did one good to see him. Wistfully, admiringly, the old voice added, "It's snug in here, upon my word." "Yes, it's comfortable enough," agreed the boss, and he flipped the Financial Times with the paper knife. As a matter of fact, he was proud of his room. He liked to have it admired, especially by old Woodyfield. It gave him a feeling of deep, solid satisfaction to be planted there, in the midst of it, in full view of that frail old figure in the muffler. "I've had it done up again," he explained, as he had explained for the past, how many weeks? "New carpet," and he pointed to the bright red carpet with the pattern of large white rings. "New furniture," and he nodded towards the massive bookcase and the table with legs like twisted treacle. "Electric heating." He waved almost exultantly towards the 5 transparent, pearly sausages glowing so softly in the tilted copper pan. But he did not draw old Woodyfield's attention to the photograph over the table of a grave-looking boy in uniform, standing in one of those spectral photographers' parks with photographer storm clouds behind him. It was not new. It had been there for over 6 years. "There was something I wanted to tell you," said old Woodyfield, and his eyes grew dim, remembering. "Now, what was it? I had it in my mind when I started out this morning." His hands began to tremble, and patches of red showed above his beard. "Poor old chap, he's on his last pins," thought the boss, and feeling kindly, he winked at the old man, and said jokingly, "I'll tell you what, I've got a little drop of something here that'll do you good before you go out into the cold again. It's beautiful stuff. It wouldn't hurt a child." He took a key off his watch chain, unlocked a cupboard below his desk, and drew forth a dark, squat bottle. "That's the medicine," said he, "and the man from whom I got it told me on the strict QT it came from the cellars at Windsor Castle." Old Woodyfield's mouth fell open at the sight. He couldn't have looked more surprised if the boss had produced a rabbit. "It's whiskey, ain't it?" he piped feebly. The boss turned the bottle and lovingly showed him the label. Whiskey it was. "Do you know," said he, peering up at the boss wonderingly, "they won't let me touch it at home," and he looked as though he was going to cry. "Ah, that's where we know a bit more than the ladies," cried the boss, swooping across for 2 tumblers that stood on the table with the water bottle, and pouring a generous finger into each. "Drink it down. It'll do you good. And don't put any water with it. It's a sacrilege to tamper with stuff like this. Ah!" He tossed off his, pulled out his handkerchief, hastily wiped his moustaches, and cocked an eye on old Woodyfield, who was rolling his in his chaps. The old man swallowed, was silent a moment, and then said faintly, "It's nutty." But it warmed him. It crept into his chill old brain, and he remembered. "That was it," he said, heaving himself out of his chair. "I thought you'd like to know. The girls were in Belgium last week, having a look at poor old Reggie's grave, and they happened to come across your boys. They're quite near each other, it seems." Old Woodyfield paused, but the boss made no reply. Only a quiver in his eyelids showed that he heard. "The girls were delighted with the way the place is kept," piped the old voice. "Beautifully looked after. Couldn't be better if they were at home. You've not been across, have you?" "No, no." For various reasons the boss had not been across. "There's miles of it," quavered old Woodyfield. "And it's all as neat as a garden. Flowers growing on all the graves, nice broad paths." It was plain from his voice how much he liked a nice broad path. The pause came again. Then the old man brightened wonderfully. "Do you know what the hotel made the girls pay for a pot of jam?" he piped. 10 francs. Robbery, I call it. It was a little pot, so Gertrude says, no bigger than a half-crown. And she hadn't taken more than a spoonful when they charged her 10 francs. Gertrude brought the pot away with her to teach him a lesson. Quite right, too. It's trading on our feelings. They think because we're over there having a look round, we're ready to pay anything. That's what it is." And he turned towards the door. "Quite right, cried the boss. Though what was quite right, he hadn't the least idea. He came round by his desk, followed the shuffling footsteps to the door, and saw the old fellow out. Woodyfield was gone. For a long moment his boss stayed, staring at nothing, while the grey-haired office messenger, watching him, dodged in and out of his cubby-hole like a dog that expects to be taken for a run. Then, "I'll see nobody for half an hour, Macy," said the boss. "Understand? Nobody at all." "Very good, sir." The door shut. The firm, heavy steps recrossed the bright carpet. The fat body plumped down in the spring chair, and leaning forward, the boss covered his face with his hands. He wanted, he intended, he had arranged to weep. It had been a terrible shock to him when old Woodyfield sprang that remark upon him about the boy's grave. It was exactly as though the earth had opened and he had seen the boy lying there with Woodyfield's girls staring down at him. For it was strange. Although over 6 years had passed away, the boss never thought of the boy except as lying unchanged, unblemished in his uniform, asleep for ever. "My son," groaned the boss. But no tears came yet. In the past, in the first months and even years after the boy's death, he had only to say those words to be overcome by such grief that nothing short of a violent fit of weeping could relieve him. Time, he had declared then, he had told everybody, could make no difference. Other men perhaps might recover, might live their loss down, but not he. How was it possible? His boy was an only son. Ever since his birth the boss had worked at building up this business for him. It had no other meaning if it was not for the boy. Life itself had come to have no other meaning. How on earth could he have slaved, denied himself, kept going all those years, without the promise for ever before him of the boy's dipping into his shoes and carrying on from where he left off? And that promise had been so near being fulfilled. The boy had been in the office learning the ropes for a year before the war. Every morning they had started off together. They had come back by the same train. And what congratulations he had received as the boy's father. No wonder. He had taken to it marvellously. As to its popularity with the staff, every man jack of them down to old Macy couldn't make enough of the boy. And he wasn't in the least spoilt. No, he was just his bright natural self, with the right word for everybody, with that boyish look and his habit of saying, "Simply splendid." But all that was over and done with, as though it never had been. The day had come when Macy had handed him the telegram that brought the whole place crashing about his head. "Deeply regret to inform you." And he had left the office a broken man, with his life in ruins. 6 years ago, 6 years, how quickly time passed. It might have happened yesterday. The boss took his hands from his face. He was puzzled. Something seemed to be wrong with him. He wasn't feeling as he wanted to feel. He decided to get up and have a look at the boy's photograph. But it wasn't a favourite photograph of his. The expression was unnatural. It was cold, even stern-looking. The boy had never looked like that. At that moment the boss noticed that a fly had fallen into his broad ink-pot, and was trying feebly but desperately to clamber out again. "Help, help!" said those struggling legs. But the sides of the ink-pot were wet and